On this episode of Spirit Talk, we talk about premonitions, precognition, and prophecy, what I like to call PPP. What is it, and how do we document our own visions and tune in to what's next? Hi, I'm Chris Fleming, the creator of Spirit Talk. You're listening to the podcast where I'll be bringing you the greatest thinkers, researchers, and contributors from around the world to discuss what we know in the field of the paranormal, life after death, and the pursuit of higher consciousness. Hello. This is Chris Fleming with Spirit Talk, and this is the September edition, but, being honest with you, I'm recording this in October. And there's a couple reasons why. One of the things was I actually caught COVID in September. Obviously didn't mean to. I actually got it from a girl I've been dating who got it from some of her friends. She was around a bunch of friends, and obviously they transferred to her and then transferred to me. The good news is, though, caught it right away because the day I was with her, she got a call and a couple of the girls were positive, and she says, "Oh my God, I better go get checked out." I figured, you know what? I've probably got it too then. So I had quarantined myself right away, and I was actually quarantined for about 2.5 weeks. But I got the symptoms about 2 days later, and I'll tell you, it's a bugger because you think it's not going to be that bad, but you go through a lot of stages. And the stages were, I had neurological pain in my joints, extreme fatigue, body aches, sharp stabbing pain along my spine as well as in my head. And just when I thought I was getting better, I got what's called particuli, and it was these like blood vessels that broke all over my legs. So that sent me into the hospital, got checked. They did a complete scan. X-rays were fine. Brain scan was fine. Lungs were good. Oxygen was at 96. Blood pressure was a little high, but I was positive. They said I looked very healthy, and they never would have thought I had it unless they saw what was on my legs. And of course, the blood test and the sinus thing that showed positive. So it was about, I would say, almost 2.5 weeks that I quarantined myself, longer than I needed to. But, I don't mind being alone and just doing stuff at home. I did not want to get my mom sick or, anybody else. Plus, I wanted to get healthy, so I would do salt baths every single night and take the vitamins. But they gave me a muscle relaxer and an inhaler that really helped. The reason for the muscle relaxer, another reason that sent me to the hospital, was I was getting these major brain spasms. And because of my car accident that I had 11 years ago, and my dad having a stroke, my mom having blood clots, the last thing was me, I'm probably susceptible to that. So I went to the hospital to get checked out to make sure. But the one thing that kind of lingered was I still had a cough off and on. My temperature never went over 97.8 or 98. But I was getting a little in a fog, like a disassociation. I couldn't think clearly. Memory was hard to access memory and complete sentences. So that was difficult. And they told me that was a symptom of a lot of people that have had COVID. I still think I'm suffering slightly from that. I just feel like my brain's not functioning like it used to, and hopefully it'll get better. It reminds me of when I first had my concussion from the TBI from the car accident 11 years ago, and what I dealt with off and on for years. And then I got better, and all of a sudden I feel like I went backwards. So hopefully that will get better. If that's the right word. But getting this COVID had me a little concerned once I started having those spasms in my head that night, because I've had premonitions in the past of my own passing, of my death. Let me explain. This goes back to around 2006. So I was driving with a buddy of mine, Andrew, and he says, I know you talk about ghosts, you've had dreams that come true and stuff like that, but have you ever foresaw your death? And he's like, I don't want to know about mine, but have you ever foresaw yours? And I said, yeah, I see myself laying in a bed, whether I'm paralyzed or whether there's something wrong with me due to something going on with my head, whether it's a tumor, an injury, to my brain, something like that. And then I see myself leaving my body, and I'm so happy to be out of my body. And as I cross over, I'm like, thank God I'm out of that body. I'm free. Since 2006, obviously, in September of 2009, I had a car accident. I was rear-ended, and I had a mild traumatic brain injury that tore the front left cortex as well as damaged from my C2 all the way down to my C7 and my T1. which has been causing me a lot of pain and I've been dealing with for the past 10, 11 years. And because of this, we've tried a lot of solutions, and I have an upcoming surgery in a couple weeks to burn the nerves from the C2 to the C5 with radiography. I think that's what it's called. But obviously, that has not paralyzed me or took my life, but there is concern that in the future, it could get worse or there could be complications depending upon, whatever else happens to me. So we then look at January of this year. I remember on New Year's, staying at home, I was sitting down by myself watching Netflix. I didn't feel like going out. And I said, okay, what's this year going to be like? What are the premonitions going to be for this year, universe? And all of a sudden, I see this chaos. A lot of chaos and going throughout the whole year. And then I toast and said, well, here's to the world changing dramatically and America never being the same again. And then I also toasted and said, and this is probably the last year I'll be on this planet. But like anything, I believe that we do get an opportunity, whether it's in an instant or a choice, that can take us down a different path to change it, when it's a premonition affecting us individually. I know that might be hard for some of you to hear, but I have to share this with you. So I've been concerned all year that, okay, what is it that I have to get by in 2020? And in talking to my guides and meditating on this, I know that there are two other situations that I have survived in the past where I was going to die. And there was a crossroad. And if I made the right choice, it wasn't going to happen. I've spoken about it in the past when I was in Costa Rica and I was going to get mugged, but I made the right decision. I spoke about this in some of my lectures and previous podcasts. And I made the right decision, the intuition that I had to choose. And the voice says choose. And I got in the car. And of course, I survived. I did not die. So I changed my future by reacting correctly. The second was a car accident in 2017, which I had premonitions about for a few years. And I had told people that I knew, as well as my counselors, that I see in the future, I'm going to get in this car accident. But it's going to be different than getting rear-ended and I'm going to be hit on the side. Then in 2017, when we were filming Help My House is Haunted, we had 3 blocks that we'd film and come home in between. Well, the very last one where I had the block of 2 weeks, I came back to the United States and I started feeling that I was going to get in that car accident. I felt it. I saw this vision now perfectly of the event. So I told my mom, I told some of my friends, I even texted it to a buddy of mine. And I realized that it's going to happen. It could be any day. So I started rehearsing the vision. I would sit there and think about the entire vision, and I wouldn't assume. I would just say, okay, what do I know from this vision? And this is what you do when you get this type of premonition or even a precognitive dream. You have to sit there and analyze just the details. Don't assume. Just write down and talk about what you know from it. What do you see? And this is similar to hypnotic regression or past life regression, where they freeze you in that moment and you analyze what you're seeing. Okay, what is the detail? Okay, what's next? How do you feel about that detail? And that's what I did. And then you say to yourself, what do I know about this? I don't know exactly where it's going to happen. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. But let's break down what I do know, okay? Every time I was getting in the car that week, I felt I was going to be hit from the left-hand side. So what I did is I would replay it and slow it down and only look at what it was telling me. And it was telling me there was a big black car that was coming from the left-hand side. Well, left-hand side, if I'm in my car, how could I be hit from the left-hand side? Well, going through an intersection, pulling out onto the street would be the most noticeable ways of that happening. So I started paying attention every time I got in the car going through intersections. I would always look to the left to see if a car was blowing off a light. Whenever I pulled out, I would always take a look to the left and I would rehearse left-hand side, left-hand side, left-hand side. It's kind of like what I learned in college when we did repetition, repetition, repetition. So you get it right. Well, after a few days of rehearsing this, I kind of forgot about it. And it might have been maybe 2-3 days later, I went to the cleaners to pick up some laundry because I was going to be leaving in a couple of days to go back to the UK. And I'm at the stoplight ready to pull out onto the street, looking at my phone. When I look up, I got the green light. So I begin to proceed forward. As I'm looking forward, I got both hands on the steering wheel. I feel this magnetic push from the left-hand side, this pressure. And it was just slight. And I turn and look casually, and I see this big black Escalade SUV flooring it. And I start thinking, wait a minute. And so I slam on the brake because at the angle I'm going, it's going to slam right into my driver's side. So I stop. And then everything goes into slow motion. And the Escalade goes right in front of my car. I see the driver. He had to be either in his late 20s, early 30s, black hair. I see his girlfriend or the woman that's in the passenger seat with like dishwater blonde hair, and she's leaning against the glass. And then I watch as slowly this car goes right in front of my car in the path that I would have been if I did not turn and see it and slam on the brakes. So what made me turn and look? Because I repeated that vision over and over and over again. It's going to be black. It's going to be coming from the left-hand side. It's going to hit me. I know that when I'm in the car and I get hit, I'm looking straight ahead, so I'm not even noticing it. So if I'm able to turn my head in time and notice it, maybe I can prevent it. And I did. And as I watched the car drive away, him completely not even aware that this was going to occur and could have happened, I realized that I just changed my path. And I was not going to be hit. And then realizing the size of this car and the impact it would have made, I would have been either killed or paralyzed. So that premonition that I had in the awakened state, I was able to change. Do you realize that? And as I drove away from this event, I felt everything wash away. I did not feel that uncomfortable feeling in the car anymore. And then I felt like, oh my God, I'm alive. My future is different. What am I going to do with this future? What new opportunities are going to bring themselves? Or what other changes? Or what do I do now? The crazy thing, I told my co-host while we were filming this first season that I did not see myself returning back for a second season, that I wasn't going to be there. And I didn't know why. Now I knew that changed. So I share this premonition with you because I want you to realize that you can make a change. You can't really change the event of that car being there at that precise time, but I could change the outcome by just a few seconds of not being in the impact of that car passing by, which obviously saved my life and changed my future. Now I have a different path. So those were two different events, but I'd always known that there was a third. But I just didn't know when. And I would tell people, I know there's going to be a third event where I could die, that if I could just get past that, I will live out my life. Then in January 1st of 2020, as it was the morning after midnight, Happy New Year, the new year of 2020 has begun. I asked the universe, what is going to happen in 2020? And right away, it was like I saw this chaos of going on, and I may have discussed this already, or I'm going to discuss it again anyway, that there would be chaos, that this was the year that things were going to go to shit, basically. But then also that this was the year I was going to have this third event, that I was going to possibly die. So when COVID happened and I got COVID, I said, oh my God, I better not get COVID. This could be why something happens to me. But then when I was getting through it, it was no big deal. But then that night with the muscle spasms in my head and the sheer pain, I thought, oh my God, I need to go to the hospital. So I did. And, as we know, I'm here today and I'm fine. So there's no problem. So it wasn't COVID. So what's next? There's only a few months left. What else am I going to be up against? I don't know. We'll see. Or maybe just going to the hospital and getting the muscle relaxers somehow, some way helped. I have no idea. Just because I've been fortunate enough to have visions prior to those death moments, maybe the third, I won't exactly know until it happens. But I do want to mention that I did get another test that showed that I was negative, and I have another test that's coming up as well. Before I have my surgery, to make sure that I'm negative. So COVID hopefully is going to be in my past. So that's what's been going on, as well as visions that I've had with some premonitions. dealing with death. I'm going to talk about death again later in this podcast regarding famous people and how you get this sense of a premonition of somebody passing. But the bulk of the podcast is PPP, and let's discuss what that is. Premonitions, precognition, and prophecy. To be able to do this, we really need to break down which each one of these things means. And the best way is to explain the definition of what it is, but then also some examples. So I'm going to use some examples of experiences I've gone through in my life that have to do with one of these things. And then some things to consider for yourself when you have a premonition or a dream, when you have a prophetic vision, or even a premonition, when you're wide awake and you feel something is going to happen, this hunch. What do? We're going to discuss that. We'll be right back. So what is precognition? Well, precognition, also called prescience, future vision, or future sight, is a psychic ability to see events in the future. So you might be asking, well, sounds like they're both the same. Well, they are. But the difference is a premonition occurs while you're awake, while you're doing something and it comes to you. Precognition, in most cases, will occur in the dream state, a meditative or dream state. So that is the difference. Premonition may just come to you while you're driving your car, you're talking to somebody, or you're just sitting there. And a precognition would be a dream that comes true. Precognitive dream. And then what is prophecy? Well, prophecy is a message that is claimed by a prophet to have been communicated to them by a deity. Such messages typically involve inspiration, interpretation, or revelation of divine will concerning the prophet's social world and events to come. It's a prediction by that prophet. I'm making a prediction. That is prophetic. You look at such prophets known as Nostradamus, received these revealing prophecies, and even in John, in the book of Revelations, and the famous Edward Casey, known as the sleeping prophet. He would go into this meditative state and connect with consciousness, and he would receive these prophecies as well as messages. That is what we look at when we talk about prophets and prophecy. An example of this, I could think many different things, but namely the one prophecy that comes to mind was January 2011. There was a paranormal event that occurred in my house. I went into a meditative state after something was holding me down. I saw these angels, and then all of a sudden, I see the image of Obama. Now remember, this is 2011, so he was in his first term. And I see Obama, he's talking, addressing the nation, and then after him, I see riots. I see fires, people in the streets, damaging glass, buildings, cars, people running. Then I see police in the streets fighting, and then military, like SWAT team type. At the time, I didn't realize, but military police. And then I saw these black vehicles going through the streets, and these personnel in all black with bulletproof vests, with masks on, and with these machine guns, all dressed in black. And then I see them coming out of this smoke. And then I saw more chaos, and then I saw somebody else that I didn't really recognize with this flag behind them. And then all of a sudden, I see myself, my mom, and my sister watching the TV in her family room den that she has. And on the news, they're telling us that there is a curfew. Telling us also that all distribution trucks and their routes have been shut down, and everything is completely shut down, and we have to stay at home. Then I come out of this. Well, I spoke about this for years at a lot of the Darkness radio events in front of live audiences. I talked about this on various radio shows. And my assumption, which I shouldn't have done, I started to assume that, okay, well, Obama's going to serve a second term. And during the time of Obama, we're going to go into martial law because all this chaos is going to occur. I don't know what's going to cause this chaos, but it's coming. riots, looting, fires, military police in the streets, racial tension, and so on. And I know a lot of people probably remember me talking about this over many years. But then Obama's second term came and went. I'm like, God, I was wrong. I was wrong. So I said, it's got to be then with the next president. And then obviously Trump became president. I said, well, it looks like it's going to be with him. But in January of 2020 on New Year's, when I sat down and was watching Netflix, and I said, okay, I toasted and said, here's to 2020. What's 2020 going to be like? And all of a sudden, as if a fast forward movie plays right in my head, and I start seeing all this chaos. I said, oh my God, this is the year. This is the year that's going to happen. And then also that there's going to be a third event for myself that if I don't get past it, it's going to be my last time on this planet. And I have to get past that, whatever that is. Well, when looking at this chaos that I was seeing in my head, I said, oh my God, it's going to come during the middle of the year, and then there's going to be something else, and it's going to keep getting worse and worse near the end of the year and just escalate. And then come near the end of the year, America's going to completely change. It's not going to be the America that we know. So I'm like, wow, what do I do? Well, obviously, the next day or two, I went on Facebook, I started typing this up, posted it, and then I deleted it within 10, 20 seconds. I said, what am I doing? If I'm wrong, and here's everybody saying, hey, 2020 is going to be great. I got all these things that I'm going to do and everything. And I'm sitting there going, people are going to hate me. I don't want to deal with the criticism. So I deleted it. And then I started telling some of my friends, I started saying, hey, dude, I got these visions of what's going to happen. And they're like, dude, I don't want to hear this, man. You are so freaking negative. I don't want to hear this. And I'm like, wow. And some of my friends kind of pulled themselves away from me. But then I went on Twitter and I started posting 2020 is going to be a bad year, a lot of chaos, this and that. And then I deleted it. And because honestly, I didn't want to deal with the criticism. Everybody says, wow, you're so negative. Why don't you be positive? I couldn't be positive. So then I just went on there and I said 2020 war, that there's going to be a war amongst the people. There's going to be a war against any of us. And then that's going to lead to a world war. But here's the interesting thing that is documented. Besides the radio shows and talking about in front of a live audience that I did over the last 10 years. And this is what's important. When you have a prophecy or a premonition, okay, whether this message is given to you or all of a sudden you get this thing in your head, it's important not to try to really decipher it and try to figure it all out and assume, because you can assume wrong, like I did with Obama. Instead of looking at it step by step, saying, okay, here's Obama, then there's stuff that's after him that I see in the background, so maybe this is coming after him, I was on the radio show for Mancow. It was in January on Inauguration Day, because I was going to be doing an event coming up that week or in February. And Mancow asked me, he says, Trump's getting inaugurated right now as our president. What do you think about him? I said, well, I don't really have it. Let's see what he does. He goes, well, do you have any premonitions about him? And I said, yeah. And he says, what? I said, well, there's going to be a civil war. There's going to be rioting, looting, and some chaos in the streets. And I see martial law, and I see military police. I see people fighting amongst themselves. And I start saying this, and they're kind of looking at me. They didn't expect that. And then he said to me, he says, well, is he going to finish his term? And I said, I don't think so. I see him being removed. And they said, how is he going to be removed? Is he going to be shot? Is he going to be this? I said, I don't know. He's just going to be removed. Because all of a sudden, I'm getting all these images of all these things playing up to that event that causes him to be removed. And they said, so he's not going to serve a second term. I said, I don't see him serving a second term because I see him being removed. And they said, well, what else? I said, well, I see martial law. I see military in the streets. I see a civil war and civil unrest. And then I see followed by a world war. And of course, it got silent in the room. That was basically the gist. Now, how the details were and what I said first and what I said last, I don't remember, but I believe that radio show is still recorded and it's still somewhere online from me speaking to him. If not, I could probably find it if all this comes to pass. So what remains from that premonition, that prophecy? Well, the prophecy was a combination of what I experienced 10 years before and a combination of him asking me and then all of a sudden it being revealed. when I look back on that from what I said there, and then 10 years ago, the prophetic vision that I saw that was coming after Obama, what's happened so far? Well, we had the rioting and the looting in the streets. We had the military in the streets, and there was a couple images that posted on Huffington Post and some other papers back in the spring and the summer showed military police in all black coming out of this white smoke and clouds from obviously the smoke bombs and the tear gas. And I said, oh my God, that's the exact images I saw. So I knew that this is the time we're in. I never knew about COVID or saw the masks. I mean, I saw masks that people were wearing, but I didn't have any relation to any virus, so I never saw that. I just assumed because it was the smoke in the streets and people were wearing that, that's all I knew. But what remains that has not been fulfilled yet? Well, Trump is still the president, and he has not been removed. So is that still coming, or was I wrong? We're going to have to see. No matter what happens when the election comes, whether he wins or Biden wins, Trump's still going to be the president until January of 2021, when either he takes a second term or Biden takes over. So what happens between the election and that time is the period that I believe the removal of Trump is going to occur. So we'll see what that is. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Or the vision is correct, then it's correct. I don't know. I cannot add to it. But there was more to than what just happened in the spring and summer with COVID and the riots. The chaos and the other further chaos of the Civil War and civil unrest. Now, we haven't had civil war. We've had people fighting against each other, against police authority, racism, Democrats against Republican. And when I said it was a combination of all these things on Mancow, it looks like that's what's going on, but it hasn't reached that intensity yet to the degree that I saw in these previous visions. And if the timeline is right, we will see over the next few months. But here's the other interesting thing in the prophecy from January of 2011. When I flash back to being in the den family room with my mom and sister watching the TV, I noticed an important detail. My stepdad is not there in the room. When I scan around the room, I don't see him. Why is he not there? Well, here's what's interesting. My stepdad has been with my mom, for 30 years. They've been married, and they've been together like almost 40 years or so. My stepdad in March was taken away from my mom and put into a care center by his side of the family. I'm not going to get into that because we have some legal stuff going on. But against my mom's intentions and wills, he was put into a care center because the family felt he needed to be, and my mom's husband was taken away. My mom was devastated and upset about that because she doesn't have access to him and he's not living there. And we were working on home care, had visited, and we were going to have home care for him. But they chose to do what they wanted, not what my mom wanted. So when COVID hits, Ray wasn't there in the house. He wasn't around. So I realized, okay, that's the time period. But there was two other details that haven't fully happened yet. So I believe that this part of the vision hasn't fully happened. And while we were watching TV, they were stating on the news that there was a curfew. Well, we did have some curfews in Chicago and some other places temporarily. But there was a curfew that was put in across the nation, so to speak, or in all major cities. And the other thing was they stated that distribution was shut down, that there would be no trucks going. If I'm correct, I don't believe that's happened yet. We still had deliveries going on and everything during all this COVID. Now, we did see a lot of trucks and Amazon trucks and everything getting attacked by some of these rioters, and they'd loot it and take all the stuff out. But maybe that's yet to come, shutting down all deliveries and distribution. I don't know. We're going to have to see. So, what has not happened yet was the removal of Trump in some shape or form. And I didn't think it was actually just because of the election. I feel like the word removed is going to be used. It didn't happen with the impeachment process, so that's not it. So we'll see how that plays out. And the other thing is more rioting, looting, curfews, martial law, and distribution being shut down. Now, there was some martial law in certain states during this COVID and some of the riots and looting, but I think it's going to be on a grander scale, and that is yet to happen yet. Then the other thing was, of course, a war. And when we talk about a war, we're talking about a prophecy of a world war, of us being involved with other countries. What's going to cause that? I don't know. All I know is that is on our timeline up until 2022. How? Why? Well, in the prophecy, I saw civil unrest and I saw a little bit of a civil war. But then I saw on a world scale. Let me rewind to about February, March of this year. The vision had been bothering me that I had on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day regarding what was going to happen in 2020. So in February or March, I remember walking down the stairs and I was looking at this painting I have. And I said, God, so what's coming? What else is coming? And then all of a sudden this voice says, now this would be like prophecy because there's some other voice that's telling me this. It's a premonition, but it's also a prophecy because it's coming from either collective consciousness or some type of entity. It says war. And I said, what do you mean war? It said armies are building. I said, why are armies building? It says for the destruction of America. And I'm realizing, oh my God, so are there armies building within our own country and armies building in other countries to try to destroy and change America? It said yes, on both sides. So how is that going to play out? Well, we saw some of it being played out through social media and propaganda, that countries overseas were pretending to be certain groups and organizations putting out false information. We know Russia's been involved in the 2016 election in some shape or form, but also Russia, Iran, and other countries were trying to create a divide within our country by putting fake stuff on social media. Now, the FBI talked about this. I did my own research following some of these profiles and saying, oh my God, they're all Russian or they're all in Middle Eastern language. So there are these organizations that are going to war with us through social media. That's like the beginning to divide the country, which, as we know, we have been divided. Yet we're blaming Republicans and Democrats and blaming each other instead of outside threats that are actually affecting us. And if you look at The Art of War, the famous book, The Art of War, one of the things is to infiltrate a country or an army and divide them from the inside out. And this is the new war, the new battlefield, is using social media against us and saying terrible things and trying to divide people. We've seen that happen within our country and then outside organizations doing that to us. But here's something else that's revealing and a bit scary, okay? Now, I know you got to be careful of the Ouija board because you don't know who you're talking to. But I've spoken about this to my co-hosts, and I think I talked about it on a radio show, and I also posted it somewhere on social media, so you can probably find it. Back in the 70s when I was doing the Ouija board all the time, talking to the ghosts in our house, because that was a way to communicate with them, I had asked them if there would ever be a world war. And this would have been probably about 1978 or 79 I asked this. They said yes. I said when? They said between 2017 and 2021 or 2022. Now, when it's 1978, 79 and you're a kid, that's a long way away. So you don't even really think of that. It's like in the future of some sci-fi movie or something. So curious, I said, okay, well, what am I going to be doing? He says, you'll be working in Europe. I said, I'll be working in Europe. Well, if there's a war going on, I'm working in Europe. Am I in the war fighting? No. Okay. Am I working for the government or military? No. Well, I'm confused. Well, what the hell am I doing in Europe when there's a war? And it says, I asked them, what will I be doing? They said, you will be talking to us. Talking to the Ouija board? Us. Spirits. Now, please understand, as a kid, I thought I was either going to be an artist, which I was for a period of time, or a fireman. How did I know that I would be doing what I do now? They said I would be talking to them. Well, guess what? In 2017, I went out to the UK to shoot Help My House is Haunted, 12 locations, 12 cases, and I communicated with them, spirits, ghosts. That is a prophecy that the Ouija board had told me, and half of that came true. So I told my co-hosts, I said, guys, this is scary because 50% of what they told me came true. The other 50% hasn't happened yet, but I am very leery and I'm watching news and I'm freaked out that there's going to be a world war because they said within this amount of time would be the timeline that this could happen. So we still have 2 more years. So we have to be very careful that we don't go into a world war. And I said that as well on Mancow. Now, I know some of you listening, like, I don't want to know this. I said, but what do you want me to do with this? You want me to just to tell you after it happened? You know, some of the things I have to tell you after it happened because you weren't there when I first started talking about it. If I don't say anything, then I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And if I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong and I'll be glad I'm wrong. Last thing I want is a world war. Last thing I want is a civil war in our country. Last thing I want is chaos and people getting hurt or dying or dividing in this country. I don't want that. So I pray that I'm wrong. But you know what? This is tearing me apart because we're on that timeline, that choice, no different than the choices I had of paying attention to that vision of getting hit or at the last second, paying attention to the left-hand side when this occurs and changing it. But the problem is, with my individual experience of being in a car accident that could be changed because I have free will, and it's only me that has the free will. I can't change the other person that's driving unless I tell him way in advance, but I don't know anything before that, only when he's going to be there at the precise moment to hit me that I can react differently. When it comes to a world event of a war and civil unrest, look at the country right now. You can't change people's minds if they like Trump or if they like Biden. You can't change people's minds because you're dealing with an emotional response that has been affected by the platform of that party. You can't change the politicians directly to where they could prevent a war or other countries and millions of people making decisions. It's no different than changing world events such as 9/11, unless multiple parties were involved to change it. So when we get a prophetic vision, the event is going to happen. It's just the reaction, the outcome can be different. But when it involves a multitude of many, many people, not everybody's going to be on the same frequency. So I have to just state, this is on our timeline. Either prepare or everybody join together, unite, and change it. But people are not going to unite, change it. You can see why I've been hesitant in discussing this. Now, I did discuss some of these things on my Spirit Talk live that I did on YouTube, and they were back in April, May, or whatever earlier this year when COVID first started hitting. I revealed some of these things. So it's on there. You can go back and watch it. Those of you that have been in some of the darkness events remember and heard me on other radio shows, you've heard me talk about this stuff. Maybe not all the details and not all the stories because some things obviously happened this year, in January. But I wanted to share these things with you. Now, where did this all start? Why do I even state this? Am I some crazy person? Well, some of you have had dreams that have come true. Some of you have had premonitions and precognition that have come true. Some of you have even got prophecies, and they have come true. And some of you have had those, and they didn't come true. Napoleon Hill spoke about a sixth sense, extrasensory perception, that you're going to get this inkling, this intuition, this hunch of either opportunity that's coming or danger. And you have to decide to pay attention to either or, to either avoid the danger and to acknowledge the opportunity and react to it. When you talk about such things as precognition, precognitive dreams, when I was 3 years old, I had that dream about my sister drowning. And my mom comes into the room and I'm crying and I'm in an emotional state that she actually is gone. My mom went into my sister's room and says, no, she's still alive. She's still here, Chris. It was just a dream. And I told her, Mom, it's not. And my mom says, tell me about the dream. Because I told her about that dream and what happened, my mom rehearsed it with me and told me, Chris, in that dream, you just stood there and then you jumped in to try to save your sister. You can't swim. You're too young. You need to run and get help and scream bloody murder if this ever happens. And then my mom, because she grew up having dreams that would come true and her mother had dreams that would come true, my mom knew that, hey, I'm going to rehearse this with my son and what he needs to do. And she did. She told me what to do step by step. As fate would have it, 6 months later, this event occurred. Couldn't change the event, but I could change the outcome by reacting differently. So when this happened and my sister fell into this pool, I raced to our apartment and screamed bloody murder that Kelly was drowning. First thing my mom says to me when she looks out the glass sliding door, she says, Chris, don't mess with it. It's not funny. I said, Mom, the dream, it's happening. My mom leaped over the gate and raced across the street to the pool. And so did all the other family members, and they raced over there. And as luck would have it, as they got there, my sister, who was only 1.5 years old, was in her little snowsuit, started filling up with water. And as she was sinking, they pulled her out. Well, you might ask, well, why didn't they just jump in the pool? Well, here's the difference. It was in the fall. The pool was drained, but they had a tarp over the pool, but it had rained heavily and a big bubble of water had accumulated in the middle of the pool. So my sister had slipped down through that tarp, that rubber tarp, into the middle of the pool and floated above where that bubble was. So what they did was they took my mom, who was only like 98 pounds back then, and she slid down without bursting that tarp and was able to grab my sister's arm and pull her out just in time without a second to spare. That precognitive dream and rehearsing it and reacting to it saved my sister's life. Now, I've told this story numerous times, and so has my mom. So you understand at such a young age, you learn very quickly that dreams can come true and you pay attention to them. Does it mean every dream I've had has come true? No. And sometimes they're slightly different. I remember in high school one morning, I got up, from sleeping and I went down for breakfast. I said, Mom, I had this really cool dream. She was like, what was your dream? She goes, do I want to hear about it? I said, yes, this is a good dream. She goes, what? I said, I met AC/DC. I was in this room and it was kind of dark and these walls were like cement. I don't know if I was at a subway station or whatever I was, but it kind of looked like that. And there was Cliff Williams and he was walking out and he said something to me. And then there was Malcolm and Brian. And I got to meet Angus and I got to meet the whole band. And I'm eating my cereal. I'm all excited that I had this dream. I hope it comes true. It felt like it did. And my mom says, well, hopefully, it does come true. About a year later, my mom lets me know that one of the flight attendants on her flight, because my mom was a flight attendant, is best friends with the bass player, Cliff Williams, of AC/DC's wife. And they're going to get me backstage pass when AC/DC comes to town. Now, I'm just ecstatic, right? This is awesome. Sure enough, AC/DC goes on the Flick of the Switch tour, and they come to Chicago at Rosemont Horizon. I get the backstage pass. And as I go backstage, I guess Cliff and the drummer had the flu. So the drummer left and Cliff was walking out and I grabbed him and says, Cliff, and his wife was there. And I said who I was and his wife recognized my name because her friend, who's a flight attendant and works with my mom, says, oh yeah, you're Pat's son and this and that. We're sorry, I'm not feeling well. I'm sick, but Brian and Malcolm and Angus are still here. So make sure you get in there to see them. I'd love to sit and chat with you, but I'm fighting the flu. And I said, no problem. And he left. But sure enough, I got to meet Angus and I got to meet Brian and Malcolm. But the interesting thing is when I met Brian and Malcolm, my sister and I had patiently sat outside. Everybody else had kind of gone through and met Angus. And I felt that some of the band members were still there. One of the tour managers kept walking by and saw us sitting there patiently. He says, hey, would you guys like to meet Brian and Malcolm? I said, yeah. He brings me into this room where they're sitting with one of the managers from Atco Records in Australia and one of their famous roadies that was there as well. They're all having a conversation, drinking some beers. And we walk in, and the one thing I noticed was that room was all cement walls, and it kind of looked like a subway station. It was very kind of dark and gray and cement-like, and I realized, oh my God, this is just like the dream. It came true. So precognitive dreams, they're not always negative that they're going to happen. And it's important to keep a journal. That's the number one thing. I have a journal from high school that I've kept that I used to write a lot of my dreams and visions down. Some of them happened, some of them didn't. I began to recognize which ones did happen and the characteristics involved with them that made them happen, or the characteristics that I noticed in them that were different than just regular dreams. And the one thing that I noticed when you're in this dream is you feel like you're actually there. But if you could look at your hands, if you could look down and look at your hands, you know that you are in some place or time and you're being able to be shown it. Because as we know, time is irrelevant and all things are happening simultaneously. So if you can react and physically look at your hands and realize, oh my God, I am actually here in this place, then you realize that it's an event yet to happen. So what do I use now? Well, there's an app called Day One And day one is you can create different categories, and I do. I create different categories, and I create one paranormal and spirit messages and stuff, and I will put in there on that day or reflect back. Oh wow, I had that dream yesterday. I got to write this down, and I'll write it down. It's a lot of times I forget, but I try to do it as much as I can, is write it down. So you can find an app or just keep a hand journal and write it in yourself. But it's important to put the date and time that it occurred, and exactly as you remember that dream, that precognitive dream. Then the other thing to do is tell your best friends, your husband, your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or people that are close to you, and let them know about it. As long as you feel comfortable with them and you can trust them. You let them know so you have some witnesses to that as well. Then when we talk about the other thing is, some of you may get this too, is we get this awareness that someone's going to pass away. Someone's going to die. And I can go back, 20 years, maybe even before that, 30 years, where I've had a bad feeling about somebody, that something's going to happen to them, and then it does. Why is that? I honestly, I can't answer that. I don't know. Obviously, with everything else that I do, maybe it's just a big part of it. It's accumulation of all these other abilities. I'll give you an example. I remember sitting down once and having some eggs, and all of a sudden, Hugh Hefner pops into my head. And I go, wow, Hugh Hefner. I said, hey, Siri, I said, how old is Hugh Hefner? When I had asked that, they told me that he was 91 years old. I said, okay. And I said, wow, I just got this feeling he's going to die soon. The very next day, he died. And that's happened to many different famous people. Robin Williams, and even James Randi. James Randi popped into my head 2019, and I'm like, he's going to die at the end of this year. No, it's not going to be this year. It's next year. And that was like in, I think it was October, November, I had this feeling. And I said, is it going to be now? He's going to die by the end of this 2019? And I was going to post it that James Randi is going to die at the end of this year. I said, wait a minute, it's not this year. It's next year. It's going to be around this time. So I kind of forgot about it, but then around April, it kind of hit me again. Hey, is James Randi still alive? He's still alive. Well, it's going to be the end of this year that he's going to pass away. Is it going to be around the fall or the winter? Not at the very end of the year, but it's going to be around that time. And I put that in my day one sometime in April, and I had posted that. Well, as we know, he passed away in October. So when I heard the news, I was like, oh my God, James Randi did pass away, and it's around this time. And it's interesting is last year, around that time in October, I was getting that feeling, but it told me it's going to be a year from now. Well, I put it in my day one, and when I heard the news, I let a friend of mine know, and I think I even let Dave Schrader know, and I also posted it on my Twitter, a screenshot of the day one. So what is that? Well, that's a premonition. That's where you get this feeling connected to somebody else. Where does this come from? Well, it's consciousness. The ether is connected to all time and space, the past, present, and the future. When you increase your awareness of consciousness, you can connect with all those different things. So if you want to increase the type of ability to have premonitions and precognition, is you meditate more and you realize that your consciousness is not limited to your brain. It exists outside the brain, connected to the ether, connected to the absolute of all things. So where do I go from here? What else do I talk about? I mean, I could talk about so many other different things. We've talked about some prophecies. We've talked about premonitions. And we've talked about precognitive dreams. I'm going to go back into high school to where these types of things used to affect me dramatically, and it caused problems with certain relationships, or people thought I was hyper, or I worried a lot, or whatever. But I felt at times that maybe I could change certain things. And I remember in high school, I was dating this girl, Christy. It was the second Christy that I dated. And I was in Canada visiting my grandma. And I had a dream when I was there that she wanted to break up with me. And we just started dating. And I was like, oh my God, she's going to break up with me. We just started, and I really like her and this and that. And so I wanted to go home. I mean, I'm on this trip. And I'm like, I need to go back home. I need to go back home early. And lo and behold, I ended up going earlier than expected, which was sad because I was spending time with my grandma. And I said, I need to get home. And I got home for that upcoming weekend, and I wanted to go out with her. So we go out that night. And I remember I had this dream that she was going to break up with me. And I saw it happening at my house on the patio. And then I saw what she didn't tell me, that she was going to go out with this other guy. He appeared in the dream as well. So I remember that night we were at a party and they said, hey, let's go back to my house in high school. So we go back to my house because my mom was out of town. And we're all inside and I think maybe we were drinking. I don't remember. But she goes outside. She goes, I'm going to go outside. Chris, can you come outside? I want to talk to you. So she goes outside in the patio, sits down on one of the chairs there. And as I start walking towards her, she puts her head down and she goes, we've known each other for a little while. And oh my God, that's what she was saying in the dream. And I go, stop right there. I know what you're going to say. You're going to break up with me. And she looks up at me and pretends I didn't even say that and continues to say that, it's just not working out. And then I sit down, I go, oh my God. I thought if I came home early, I could change this, but I couldn't. Her mind was already made up. But what freaked out my buddy who was inside, I was upset about this, and I went inside and my buddy was there and I said, dude, she just broke up with me. And he says, yeah, she kind of told my girlfriend and, I kind of knew. And I said, well, it's something she doesn't know that I know. She's going to go out with so-and-so. She's going to go out with Todd. And his eyes lit up like, how did you know that? I said, I had a dream all about it. And he told me later, I really freaked him out. How was I able to perceive this before it happened, but knew that which nobody else was told? And they hadn't even started dating yet, but she wanted to go out with him. Well, that was a precognitive dream, but it's also a premonition, an event that's going to happen. So there was times that I would try to change these because I've changed them in the past. And there are just, unfortunately, when it involves other people's free will, you can't change the event. You can change the outcome sometimes in some ways. So what about world events? Well, the problem with world events is sometimes we don't know the exact date, time, and place that it's going to happen. So if you have a prophecy or a premonition or even a precognition in a dream state that this major event's going to happen, and it can happen to many people all over the world in different stages. Someone can get a message from, the other side that this event's going to happen. Someone could be driving their car, all of a sudden they get this premonition or this feeling something's going to happen. Someone could be sleeping and they have a dream that an event is going to happen. What I'm alluding to is 9/11, September 11th, 2001. This needs to be discussed. Now, I have recordings of some of my friends that remember this day and time when I shared this information with them. All I remember is I was in the mortgage business, and it was in August of 2001. We're sitting there, and Don, one of the loan officers, makes a joke because I talked about World War III happening. And he says, oh, yeah, like Chris said, World War III is going to happen. I said, well, it is. It's eventually going to happen. There's going to be all these other wars all over the Middle East and other places. And he says, oh, yeah, how's it going to start? And I said, there's going to be a terrorist attack in the United States. He says, where? I said, New York. I said, the World Trade Center is going to be hit by missiles and destroy both World Trade Center buildings. He says, Chris, that happened years ago. They tried to bomb it, and it's still there. I said, no, this is going to happen. And he says, when? I said, I don't know, maybe within maybe 6 to 18 months from now. There was 3 people present that heard this. I didn't know this was going to happen 2 weeks later, which it did. Where did it come from? I don't know. I think something he sparked by saying that popped in these images into my head, and I told him this. Now, I did not predict 9/11 because I did not know the exact date. All I predicted and saw was an event, as many people did. So many people after that had dreams, visions. People even went to the building, says, I don't feel right, I got to go back home, or I'm not going to work today. They had all different types of premonitions, precognitions that avoided the disaster. And then some, unfortunately, even spoke about it. And it's written in some books. They knew this event was going to happen, but they felt they still needed to be there because that was how they were going to end their life. But it doesn't end there. I remember the day before 9/11. My ex-girlfriend, I went over to her house because I said, I need to be around you. She goes, I'll make you dinner. And we had broken up a while ago. And unfortunately, I had got out of another relationship that I was devastated because I really liked this girl. And here I am going back to my ex-girlfriend, not to be with her physically, but just having that emotional support and sharing with her how I felt. But I said, there's something else. I told her, I said, Jen, there's something else. I feel something's coming. I get these dreams lately, the past 2 days, and this feeling there's going to be a major world event. I don't know if it's a war or something else, but I feel this disaster is going to occur because I see TVs on all over the world and all the leaders and people watching this event on TV. She goes, when? I said, I don't know, but somehow America's involved. That was on September 10th, 2001. The very next day, I got up early and I had this feeling, this just drained, dead feeling, and I went to work extremely early because I couldn't sleep all night. And of course, listening to the radio, which I never listened to, on the radio, they said, get this, we interrupt this broadcast or this song, just let you know that a plane just went into the World Trade Center. And one of the DJs, assistant teacher, goes, wow, what a terrible pilot. And then as I got to the office, they talked about a plane going into the other building. And then I knew something was happening, so I raced into the office. I said, turn on the TVs right now. And we had the TVs on, and of course, the rest is history. Then a friend of mine, when we watched the buildings collapse, he turned to me and he says, his name was Rick, turned to me and says, Chris, you're right. I go, what do you mean I'm right? You told us 2 weeks ago that this would happen. And it's happening right now. And then I realized, oh my God, I forgot. I called Jen. I said, Jen, are you watching the news? She says, yes. She goes, last night. I said, yes. She goes, is this it? I said, this is the beginning. So there was a prophecy, a prophetic vision. A week later, I get a call from my cousin Laura. She says, I think Molly is psychic. I said, why? She goes, well, that morning she woke up at 4 a.m. crying and screaming. She said she had a terrible dream that she saw men. She called them Mexicans, unfortunately, because being that young, being 8 years old, the difference between certain nationalities, between Middle East, Mexicans and stuff like that, you don't know. She says she saw them flying planes into buildings. And of course, hours later, 4 hours or so later, that event happened. So what is this that allows us to, well, I don't know. I think it's just that time is all connected, past, present, and future. Connected through the collective on the ether that allows everything to be there. And some of us all over the world are able to tap into that, whether it's a major event or whether it's just an individual event. If you look at the photograph that I put on this podcast, I couldn't find the exact one that I found that was on Huffington Post. It was the exact image I saw 10 years before in the prophecy of this chaos and military in the streets that occurred this year. The photo that I used for the Spirit Talk podcast is similar. And it shows the military police coming out of the smoke and the fire. That's come to pass. But like I stated earlier in this podcast, and I know I've been all over the place on this podcast, and I've recorded this a couple times, and I am all over the place because it is so hard for me to talk about this. Plus, having COVID, I'll tell you, it's kind of messed up with my head to where organizing my thoughts is kind of difficult. So I may have repeated myself here. I may have gone all over the place. The structure I wanted to have to discuss this isn't quite there. I have some news. I am editing this in after the fact of everything else that I've recorded here because a week ago, my stepdad has passed away. He died of COVID. His name was Ray Steinbus, and we love him. We're going to miss him. Now I know why my mom was worried about COVID. And every time even I came over, had a mask on, and she kept saying COVID, COVID, COVID. Doesn't want to catch COVID, and she's just been so obsessed because her husband has died from COVID. The memory care center that his family put him in, we didn't want him in. We wanted him to stay in the house. 17 or 18 people all got COVID, the elderly in there. It spread quickly, and unfortunately, it hit my stepdad, our stepdad, my stepdad, whatever. I can't even think. It hit him very hard that within a day, he was in ICU, and he died 3-4 days later. I can see now why my mom was so upset about COVID and devastated that she wanted her husband back in the house. It was not, she didn't give permission for him to be taken away and put in the care center. It was his daughter. We had to have whatever, a lawsuit against it, but now it doesn't matter because he's gone. My mom knew. But I want to share something with you that I knew. Back in March, he had gone to the doctor for something and his memory wasn't quite there, and he came back that day. And I stopped by at my mom's house to see that she was okay, and he was there. I live about 25 minutes from them. And all of a sudden, he's at the kitchen table, and I had this feeling. And I know that feeling. I had the feeling with my dad. I've had it with other celebrities, that he's not going to be around much longer. But then it says, Chris, this is an opportunity. You need to say what you need to say, and you need to give him that hug. So I looked at him and I said, Ray, and he wasn't quite there. He was suffering just a little bit of dementia because of what he had happened to him the day before, because he fell and hurt himself. I said, Ray, I just want you to know I love you very much. And I want to thank you for what you've done for my mom and what you've done for our family. I also want to tell you that there is a heaven. Jesus is real. God is real. There is a heaven and this place for you. So I know you're Catholic, you're Christian, and I want to know that everything is real. He says, oh, that's nice. That's nice to know. And I gave him a hug and a kiss. I said, thank you so much. My mom entered. She goes, what are you doing? She goes, stop that. And I said, Mom, and I yelled at my mom, stop, because she didn't know, she didn't see, she didn't feel what I felt because it hadn't happened yet. And I said, Ray, I just want you to know this just in case, I don't see you again. Well, sure enough, I went home that night. Later that week, his family whisked him away to a hospital and then put him in a care center, and he had never been back to the house since. And then COVID hit, and we weren't able to see him until I think it was about 4 months ago. We got to see him. I can't remember what month, whether it was June or July. We got to go visit him, but we had to be 12 feet away, and we had to wear our masks. So we couldn't even give a hug. We couldn't even touch. We couldn't do any of that. And that's what really sucked, is my mom could not give her husband a hug. I could not give my stepdad a hug. And now, after what just happened with him passing away, I now know at that moment, the universe told me that was the thing I needed to do, so I didn't have any regret, and that I would be able to do that. And I did. I was able to tell him I loved him. I was able to tell him about the afterlife. I was able to thank him, because that was the last chance I had to be face to face holding him before COVID hit. And they did what they did to our family by taking him away. So I'm grateful that the premonition that I had in the universe actually was probably a prophecy, because the message was coming to me from my guides, allowed me to take advantage of that moment to tell him exactly how I felt. And I know now that he's on the other side, that he's able to acknowledge that. And the other thing I want to say is, when I got the call from my sister that he is in ICU and he was going to be passing away, I remember him telling me a year and a half ago in the car when I drove him somewhere. We went to go pick up some takeout or whatever it was. I can't remember. He said to me, he goes, Chris, I'm ready to leave this place. The world's gone to crap. It's not the world that I grew up in. I've done everything I want to do. I can't drive anymore. So that was the whole thing in my life, was I was still able to drive. Now that I can't drive, I just don't want to be here anymore. Don't tell your mother, but that's how I feel. So him passing away was his choice. What happened to him wasn't the choice, but it's just sometimes that's the way it plays out. So, of course, I have emotion that he's gone, but I know he knows how I feel because I told him. And, of course, he knows now in spirit. The one thing I do want to add, last week I was at Lynchburg University, actually public, which was crazy, is they wanted me to be there in person. And I was there last year and we had a lot of paranormal stuff happen, which was really cool. So they brought me back. I did my presentation. Then we did a ghost hunt at 2 different locations on the campus using various ITC programs. One of them was an app. Something really interesting happened. I felt the presence of my stepdad before the day he passed. I was eating, fried chicken in my kitchen, and all of a sudden I said, Ray, are you free that you're in spirit right now? Did you just pass? And I felt his presence. And then a couple hours later, my sister calls me and tells me that he just passed away a couple hours ago. So I knew I felt his presence. But I didn't know if he was going to leave any messages or anything else was going to come through, because I know he made peace and I made peace with him. And, we have to just allow that person to go home. But little did I know that during that 3-4 day period when he was in ICU and we were told he wasn't going to make it, I went up to my meditation room and I did prayers for the dead. And I prayed for him. And praying for him, I said, God, please send 2 angels to stand by him so he's not alone, and allow his loved ones and family members that have crossed over to be there as well. But have these 2 angels be there to represent me. And when he leaves the physical body, it's the first thing he sees is these 2 beautiful angels. And then please take him and protect him wherever he wants to go, to make sure that he is not interrupted by any negative spirits or anything like that. And he can go see us, or he could travel and he can go to the other side, no problem. Allow them to be there as his guardians. And then I did that prayer, and then I didn't think anything else of it. That was it. Well, of course, days later, when I'm in Lynchburg and we're doing this ghost hunt, all of a sudden the app starts saying, pilot, downed planes, pilot, pilot. So I said to the students that are, anybody got a father who was a pilot, or he went down in a plane, or he downed planes? And then it says, stepdad. I go, wait a minute. Oh my God, my stepdad was a pilot and he fought in the Korean War and he downed planes. And I said, Ray, is this you? And all of a sudden you hear it come through, yes. And it's his voice. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I said, this is my stepdad. He just died last week from COVID. And I'm like, okay. I said, Ray, what do you want to say? What do you want to say? And he says, thank you for the 2 angels. I'm sorry, I had to edit that out. I got a little emotional. And I started crying in front of the whole audience. And I actually broadcast this live on my Facebook, so the video's on there. And I said something to him then, the angels, so you got the angels. And he says, they're still here. So the angels were still with him. And then he went in to talk about something that happened many years ago when he got mad at me that I completely forgot about. And he says something like, now I know that it wasn't your fault and I'm sorry. And I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot about that. And for him to bring that up, I knew it was him. So here's the thing, people. My friends, my listeners, we're all connected. Whether we agree or not, whether we're Democrat, Republican, whether we're this government or that government all across the world, whether we're black, white, we all come into this world and we all leave this world. And we all have a choice where we go. And the decisions and choices we make within this world affects one another. But also we will get signs, messages, things that we can change, things that we can't, that we have to prepare for. Pay attention to them. Because sometimes you're given a second chance, a third chance. So the question is am I going to make it through these next couple months? I believe my odds are pretty good, and here's why. I've already stated to the universe that I want to write my book. I still have a lot more to do. And if it's allowed, I would like to stay. But there's one thing I didn't tell you yet. In November of 2019, I had a precognitive dream. And in that dream, I looked at my hands and I realized, oh my God, I am here. This is a little weird. But in that dream, I saw this darkness that was coming, and I felt like I was in Switzerland or some part of Europe. And there was the van like we use in Help My House is Haunted. And there was a child that was in the van that was about 8 years old that I knew, and I realized this is the daughter of some girl that I'm dating. I don't know who yet, because obviously I may not be with this person yet. But this vision that I saw was I was in a place in time that I was unfamiliar with yet because it hasn't happened yet. And what led up to me being there has not occurred, so it's not in my consciousness. But it's in the ether. And it was important for me to see this. Now, at first, I thought this was just a regular dream until I started seeing all these people running in one direction out of fear. They were racing away from something. So this was nighttime. The sky was lit up by the moon, so it was kind of bright for a moonlit night. But I go outside and go, why is everybody running? What are you running away from? They're all running in a certain angle away from something, but they're looking up at an angle and they're completely ignoring me. So I realized that they're in such fear that they're not even noticing that I'm here because they're so terrified. So I look thinking that, okay, was this dream? There's going to be Godzilla or some giant monster. And I look up and I don't see anything. So I go back into the van and I'm like, all right, this is really weird. What the hell's going outside? And I'm looking through the windows. If I see anything, I don't see anything yet. But then a car pulls up with an old man and his wife, and they're looking in the window to see if anybody's here to try to take them with because they're getting out of town, leaving Dodge. And they just drove by and kept going. And I said, so I go back outside. Well, just before I go back outside, the girl comes racing in and she's crying. She's terrified of something. What's wrong? She goes, it's coming, it's coming. I go, what's coming? Like she's trying to tell me something. She goes, I'm scared. I said, well, there's nothing to be afraid of. So I said, go back in the room. I go outside. And I'm looking around, go, what is this where am I? Why am I here? And then I turn to the left and then I see it. I see the sky completely black. And I realize, oh my God, is this an F5 tornado? A storm coming in. But then there's no lightning. There's no sound. There's no wind. There's nothing going up into the air to this. I begin to realize that this thing is swallowing everything in its path. This darkness is bottomless. I'm like, oh my God, is this a black hole? And then a voice says, look closer. I look closer and I feel my consciousness connect with this thing. And it starts to go to fear and then it quickly reverts, no, it's not my fear. And then I realize that this is some type of collective consciousness entity. It is anger, fear, violence, hatred, everything that is built up. And I realized, oh my God, the dark masses, the black masses we see at haunted houses that go through walls and everything, this was that, but so big that it was swallowing everything in its path. And it was slowly coming. Now I'm thinking, I got to jump in the van, get out of here and try to outrun it. And then a voice says, you can't outrun this. It's fate. So I turn around and I look at this and I said, how do we beat this? And all of a sudden I look down at my hands, I flip my hands and I realize, I'm here. This is a future event that I'm seeing. And then I remember chi energy, the connection to the creator, the light that is within inside all of us, the heaven that's inside all of us, that needs to be channeled through us to defeat this. Everybody was running in fear and was afraid to face their fear. They were terrified. But what this thing was afraid of was unconditional love and the light. And allowing that light and love to come through us. And then I was shown in a brief moment that what's going to be in my hands that's going to come out, as well as other people all around the world coming together and presenting love and praying, and then putting love towards this thing, not fear, not hate, not anger, that is accumulated over this period of time, will cause this thing to go back. Now I woke up from this and I was like, oh my God. And I went down and I drew a drawing of it. I posted this drawing on my social media, on Twitter, I think Instagram, maybe even on Facebook as well. And I discussed it. What is this prophecy that I saw, this precognitive dream? I can only assume two things. One, it was not a storm. It was not an atomic bomb going off. It was either a black hole that had a consciousness, or it was something that got through into our dimension from CERN, that they opened a doorway up and this thing came through like a black hole and started just absorbing everything. And then I look at Revelations, the key to the bottomless pit. And I realized, oh my God. But then what's interesting, since then, And over the last year, trying to figure out why, in the filming of not Dead Famous, but Help My House is Haunted 2019, we kept getting the doorway, the gate, the key. And in Revelations, it says the key to the bottomless pit will be opened. And then you look at what's going on in CERN in Switzerland with the Hydro Collider. They're wanting to open up some dimensions or doorways and let something through. Look up CERN and the conspiracies involving CERN, and you're going to be shocked. I believe this has something to do with that in the future. Could be a couple years from now, maybe 5 years from now, 6 years from now. But this is on our timeline that something is going to be opened up. I pray it doesn't happen. When I tried to refute it and say, okay, maybe it's just a bad dream, it's just a fantasy dream, or maybe it's a metaphor for all the hate and everything we've had in America this year and the anger. But then as soon as I started thinking that, darkness started popping up in various forms of media. Lock and Key, the very beginning of Lock and Key, talks about the darkness is coming. A documentary that's on Prime talks about this Indian guy and his heritage that talks about the darkness is coming, and he had this vision that in the future this darkness is going to swallow everything. Then other movies, The King and I think it's called, or some other movie like that, they fight this darkness that comes. And then even in songs that start popping up, and I'm like, oh my God, over the span of a month and a half, all these situations involving this darkness start popping up, and I realized the universe was showing me a possibility of what's coming. So I know this is probably scaring the crap out of a lot of you, but take this for what it's worth, tuck it in the back of your mind, but realize there's an answer, there's a solution. In this day of darkness, whatever it comes, and it's interesting as Biden just started talking about this dark winter. Okay, so they're starting to use this word. And I think a lot of this is in the subconscious. They don't realize it. And even these creators and makers of these movies and these songs don't realize it because it's in the ether and collective consciousness and creativity. We can absorb that and we can transfer it into some of our creations, our paintings, our drawings, our writings, our scripts, our movies, our artwork, without realizing it, future event. The light will always overcome the darkness. But to defeat the darkness of this magnitude will take the light and love of many to unite and stand up to it with no fear. This darkness feeds off of fear, no different than some of our politicians that are controlling you and trying to manipulate you with fear. Whether it's fear or hatred towards other races, fear or hatred towards other candidates or politicians, fear or hatred of losing something or not having something or something being done to you. Do not let that fear grow because it's feeding this thing that's coming. And we have to stand up to this. We can stand up to this. So I'm hoping I'm around should this happen so that I can stand up to this with many other people. I can't do it alone. There's no way. If this is real, if this vision that I had is real, then it's going to take all of us to stand up to this thing, to stand up to the hatred, the anger, the violence, the negativity, and that's metaphorically speaking as well with what's going on in our country. Because we do affect the environment. We do affect our dimension. If all our collective consciousness is feeling a certain way, it's going to change our world, which could make our world vibrate differently to allow something else to access it. We know this with the law of observation. The law of observation states that nothing really happens until it's observed. Well, if we are observing America and other parts of the world collapsing or running into this divide and everything else, don't you think that's going to affect everything else around us? It will, because it already is. So we need to change that. Thank you for listening to this. There's a lot more that I kind of wanted to say, but we've reached our time limit on this podcast. I know this is going to be out of the ordinary, and this might kind of rub some of you the wrong way, but I had to state this in case something happens to me, or to let you know, to keep this in the back of your mind, so that that if this time comes, we can make a difference. We can create change. But war is not going to solve war. Hatred is not going to solve hatred. Anger is not going to solve anger. Yes, we need to stand up for what's right, but we need to find a way to unite and do that and not divide. Peace to all of you, and I'll see you for the next podcast. This is Chris Fleming, and you've been listening to this edition of Spirit Talk.